Hello and welcome to this lecture. So in the previous lecture we saw how we can just use that command to make the payload, but the payload was completely not right, because if you just see in this compiled version, there was not the payload that we want to create. So if you go over here in the source, it was over here, but while we go to this compiled version, it was not converted to .exe, and there is no payload.exe. So what has happened is, basically in this module, or basically while making the payload, these were the some of these payload options, like there was username, processes, so that also matters while making the payload. So if you just make any mistake, or if you just customize that is beyond its capability, then it is not going to execute, or basically our compiler is not going to make us that payload. So what you have to do is you have to be inside certain boundary in order to make that payload. So let's make that correctly in this lecture now. So first of all, what I want to do is, let me just make this a little bit bigger. So after that, this is the veil. So I have just opened this veil. You know how to open. Go to the optionals, because we have here the optional. So first of all, let me show you. Let's go back to our computer, and here we have this opt. So let me show you that inside this computer we have this opt folder. Inside this opt folder you can see the veil. So in order to open that, simply open this veil.py. you'll just get this console, or you'll just get this framework here. So in order to make this, so first of all you have to use, that is, now in this case I have to list first. So I'll just say list, and there is all the payload. I want to use this 15 number payload. So let's see options one more time. So I have just changed this YEL host, that is the IP address of this Kali machine, YEL port to this 8080, and I haven't changed the username. Let me just change the processors, because let's say that if we want to make a unique, let's say I want to change these processors, and I want one processor. So let's check again the options. So it should be all in lowercase, because it is the case sensitive. You can see we have now set the processor as a 1, and now what you want to do is simply type generate, and this is the command that is going to generate us a payload. So now let's give some name. So in this case I want to give the name as a payload again, and let's wait for a certain time, and let's see if this works or not. So it has completely made us this payload, and it has shown that this payload is inside over here, which is this executables. So in order to just go to this location, first of all let's navigate over there from this GUI interface, and this is inside this var. Library veil is right here, and it is in output. And now you can see in this compiled and source you will have this payload. So let's go for this compile, and you can see this is our payload that is going to listen on that port, and it is going to have that connection on that host. So next thing what you need to do is you have to set a listener, because while sending this payload to the client will get the connection to the server. So there should be some port that the server is going to listen, so that the client will just get connection from that port. So let's make that, and in order to make that connection, you have to just first of all use this console, and this is the interface that is given by the meterpreter. So you can clearly see over here it is saying meterpreter. So this is given, or basically this is the framework, or you can also say the enterprise that is going to have us some handler in order to communicate with these Kali machines. So let's make that console, or basically that handler over here. So let's create the new window, and the interface that we are going to use is MSF console. So first of all just type MSF console, let's hit enter, and it is going to give us the application inside this terminal. So let's wait for some moment. It is going to take some time. So now it is showing that it is starting the Metasploit framework console, and this is the framework that is giving us this veil evasion. So let's go over here, and first handler you have to use is the exploit multi handler. So this is the okay, it should be exploit. So this is the handler that we are going to use to have the connections. So it is done using the socket in the case of Python programming, so we'll see about that in the next upcoming sections. But in the Kali it is so easier to do with this MSF console. So let's hit enter now, and you can see now we are inside this multi-handler. So the next thing what you can do is, I'll just say show options, and let's see, this is the options, but we don't have anything over here, that is the name of the payload or the EL host or EL port. So let's set that first. So in order to set, that is the same method that we just did in this Veil Evasion. So what you need to do is, first of all, set this payload the name. So if you just see that we had written something that is in our leaf pad over here, that is go meterpreter and the reverse HTTPS. So we have to now use this name of a payload right here. So it is in this Windows, because first of all we have to see where this is going to be executed. It is in the Windows and the meterpreter, and after that you have to just give the name as reverse, and okay, it's reverse HTTPS. If you use the payload that is made by the Veil, that can be the reverse TCP, then you have to type here reverse TCP. If it is reverse HTTP, you can just type reverse HTTP. So make sure that this is the name of your payload, or basically it is what we have over here, right here. So you can see, if you use this name, that is reverse TCP service, you have to just type right over here. And now if I hit enter, then let's show the options one more time, and you should see now that is we have this payload now. So it was hidden in the previous case. Now we have just got this payload option right here. So now you could clearly see we have these payload options, and it is showing that it is Windows meterpreter reverse HTTP. Yes. So you can see here we have these two attribute, that is name, which is EL host and EL port, and this should be exactly the same which we use while making that payload. So the EL host should be the IP address of Kali. So I'll just say EL host, and it is 192.168.1 dot, and it is 12. So this is my Kali machine, EL host. Set EL port now, and that should be 8080. Now if you see one more time, that is options, you will see we have now set inside this payload option, that is the EL host and the EL port, and this is the port that client is going to communicate with the server, which is our Kali machine. So let's now type this exploit to OIT exploit to initiate this handler. So now if I just hit enter, then it is going to now listen on that port. You can clearly see it has started this reverse handler, because this is reverse. We are using this reverse TCP or reverse HTTPS payload. That is the meaning of this reverse handler. So what happens is, this Kali machine is not going to interact with our client. Instead, client machine or Windows machine come to communicate with us in this Kali machine, so that the firewall will get the permission, or basically will just get the permission to run the payload in the client machine, because it is the case that Kali machine is not going to just interact. If Kali machine had to interact with the client, then it is not possible, because there is antiviruses that will just block our connection. But in this case, client machine is going to communicate us in the Kali machine. That means you can clearly see that it is a reverse shell, or you can also see this is a backdoor. We'll also see the implementation in the next lecture, and in the Python lecture we'll see how we can just use this backdoor to capture the keylogs. We'll see how to capture every information, and we can also see how to capture the screenshots. We'll make all of those in the Python lecture, but for now you can see we have just handler here, which is going to listen on that port. So in the next lecture we'll just make a simple delivery technique, which will just get that payload delivered to the client, and client will just download that and it will just execute. And basically this is not the proper delivery method, but you can assume, or you can use some social engineering technique, like you can just email it with something else, or you can package it and making something like, you can say, use the AutoEat language in order to convert it to the PDF file, so that it will be just a genuine file for the client, so that they will just download it, they will just install it. So it's up to you, up to your imagination, how you can just trick or you can just entice your client computer. So this will be wrap for this lecture. In next lecture we'll see the simple delivery technique, and we'll just implement this well framework patterns, or basically we have here that is a Metasploit that is going to now communicate with this client machine, and we'll just execute some of the commands in the client machine in the next lecture. See you in the next one.